The phrase that I use in the book to describe this exact phenomenon, where you on the one hand have hypersexual public life. You can walk down any street and see women in lingerie on posters or watch TV, and there's very explicit sex scenes, etc. So on the one hand, we've had this amazing ramping up of sexuality in public life. But on the other hand, exactly as you say, we have what's sometimes called the sex recession, the fact that people are having sex later, less frequently. I think what's happening generally is people are having probably more casual sex, but they're having sex less frequently. So when they are having sex, it's more likely to be casual, but they're not forming these long-standing relationships. And the term that I use in the book is cultural death grip syndrome, taken from the quasi-medical term death grip syndrome, which is used by compulsive porn users to describe the physical experience of impotence when you use too much porn. You get to the point where you actually can't be aroused either physically or psychologically in real life because you use so much porn. And I think cultural death grip syndrome is the counterpart to that, where on the one hand we have this astounding availability of sexual stimuli at the click of a button at any moment. Anything that you can imagine is available on the internet immediately. And that seems to be demotivating people to actually seek out meaningful sexual relationships, which in the long term are vastly better for us in every possible way. But we have a culture enabled by technology, which is very, very short term in every way. So people are channeled towards that kind of immediate relief.
Despite the U.S. blowing through the $31.4 trillion debt ceiling last month, the White House still refuses to reduce spending. Our national leadership has buried their heads in the sand, but you don't have to. Call the experts at Birch Gold today and start diversifying into gold. For over 5,000 years, gold has withstood inflation, geopolitical turmoil, and stock market crashes. With help from the experts at Birch Gold, you can own gold in a tax-sheltered retirement account. Birch Gold makes it easy to convert an IRA or 401k into an IRA in precious metals. Just text Jordan to 989898 to claim your free info kit on gold, and then talk to one of their precious metals specialists. With an A+ rating with the Better Business Bureau, thousands of happy customers, and countless 5-star reviews, you can trust Birch Gold to help protect your savings. Text Jordan to 989898 today.
I think the rule is something like unearned surfeit turns into revulsion. Right. It's too much of a good thing means that it's no longer a good thing. And that, and that goes along with an idea too that there's something like optimal deprivation, right? I mean, look, let's say you've just had a big banquet and someone sits you down and says, well, now you have to eat 5 pounds of dessert. It's like, first of all, that's not going to be a very attractive proposition. And second of all, it might actually make you ill, is that everything has to be in proper proportion. And one of the things we really haven't contended with at all in our society is how much desperation is necessary on the sexual front to drive young men and young women together. And the answer is not zero. And the problem with pornography, one of many problems, is that it drives desperation on the male front down to zero. Now, I know perfectly well from my clinical experience that the standard state of most young men, especially under 20, let's say, is pretty much terror in the face of a woman who they're very attracted to. And the reason for that is that, there's all sorts of reasons, but the primary reason is the probability that any given male, even one who's very attractive, let's say in multiple ways, is going to be rejected by any given female, especially a high-value female who has a lot of people attracted to her, is extremely high. So there are classic psychological experiments showing this. If you send attractive undergraduates out to talk to other undergraduates to offer sexual access, say, well, would you be willing to have coffee with me? Would you be willing to give me your phone number? Would you be willing to come back to my apartment? If the girls offer that, then whoever they're offering that to on the male front will take them up on their offer. But if the boys offer that, even when they're attractive, the probability that their advances will be rejected is extremely high. And so young men face the uncomfortable situation where even if they're competent and will turn eventually into useful men, which isn't the status of most very young men, the probability that they'll be rejected is extremely high. And then it's also the case that there's little that's more psychologically impactful than such rejection, especially if it's undertaken by someone to whom there's a genuine attraction. So that means that boys are paralyzed into terror. I think that's not too exaggerated a term, by the mere fact of attractive women. And so, they slough that off and they make derogating jokes and so forth to try to get over that, but doesn't change the basic reality. And that also means that a certain percentage of males, and it's not low, really, it could easily be like 30% are just paralyzed into utter stasis by the possibility of rejection, especially because they haven't been fortified against it with their dependency-inducing upbringing. Unless they're driven forward by a certain amount of desperation, some of which needs to be sexual, they're never going to break through that barrier. And so then they can satisfy themselves momentarily with pornography, and then that turns into that host of problems you already described. Is now they're training themselves, maybe right from puberty, to be impotent, cuckold voyeurs, essentially. So that's not good training. Then they're training themselves to view women as targets of short-term gratification. So that's like training in psychopathy. And then they're also interfering with their ability to establish a relationship and also to perform sexually in a real environment. So all that seems like, like a five-dimensional catastrophe. And that's going to get a lot worse in the next year, by the way, because we haven't seen anything on the pornography front compared to what's going to be coming down with the advent of AI. Because now what's going to happen real soon is that this is already underway. So imagine a sign-up service where you can talk to a very attractive young woman. And she's an AI, right? So she can be as attractive as you want her to be and tuned exactly to your preferences. Okay, so now there's already a service offering this, by the way. So now you have a friend, and that friend can keep track of your conversations, and especially if you're lonesome and isolated, that might be the best friend you've ever had, and certainly the most attractive person you've ever talked to. Now, it's not real, but, men are pretty damn visual. So it's got a long ways towards real. And then, for your subscription fee, you can talk to the woman nude, and then the whole avenue of sexual display is open to you. And so God only knows what that's going to do.
Yes, and sex robots are the next step, where you have a
Well, and then the integration of those two things. Yeah, that'll be great. That'll really get us going.
You end up in a situation where young men can feel as if they are winning at life, right, with their sex robot, who's giving them all the cues that suggest fitness. But in fact, they don't need to wash, they don't need to have a job, they don't need to do anything productive with their lives because the sex robot doesn't care. OnlyFans, I think, is a step along this path, because what OnlyFans offers is not just pornography. It offers a parasocial relationship. It gives the impression to customers that this woman cares about them, remembers his birthday, remembers his children's names, all of this stuff. But it's all obviously a mirage, and it's one that's purchased. And it's completely the wrong incentive structure for everyone.
Right, well, and that's narcissistic exploitation on the part of the females with antisocial personality traits, and often, what would you say, aided and abetted by quasi-psychopathic pimps, electronic pimps. And, those OnlyFans women, that you made a very good point there, those are actually androids, right? Because they're not women. Now, you might say, what the hell are you talking about, Dr. Peterson? Obviously, they're women. It's like, no, they're not. They're machine-women hybrids. And the machine is the technology that can broadcast their image to millions of people. So you're not a woman anymore if you're in a million men's bedrooms at the same time. You're a woman-machine hybrid. Now, it's virtualized, obviously, because it's two-dimensional and it's not embodied in the form of a robot. But the idea that that's not an android means that you're an idiot. That's what it means. It's obviously an android. And there is definitely that form of parasitism on the female part. These women have embodied capital. That's a good way of thinking about it. So they're young, they don't have economic resources, but they're young and beautiful. And that's an economic resource. Make no mistake about it. In fact, it's the highest possible form of wealth. This is another thing that the Marxist types get real wrong with their economic analysis, because if you took, let's say, a hyper-rich 80-year-old woman, and you said, well, you give away 99% of your fortune, and now you inhabit the body that you had when you were 20, and then we could add to that the possibility of being stellarly beautiful, the probability that that woman would trade everything she has for that opportunity, assuming she hasn't become disenamored of life, is extraordinarily high. And so that also means that on the female side, and this is happening continually, female exploitation can take place with regard to men, just like male exploitation takes place with regard to women. And those women are not doing other women a favor either by monopolizing the marketplace, let's say.
No. I think that one of the ways in which women are hurt by the pretense that is widely practiced that men and women are psychologically the same and that male and female sexuality is the same, is that it's very easy for a young, beautiful woman to mistake male sexual desire for high regard. And to I think that really there are two parallel tracks when it comes to male sexual desire for women. There is the short term and the long term, and they are not at all the same. And that being very highly desired on the short term track does not necessarily translate into being very highly desired on the long term track. In fact, sometimes quite the opposite. And I think that the main error that women are making with thinking that OnlyFans is a quick buck, not only is the fact that OnlyFans is enormously unequal, and actually there are very few people on it who are making any real money, and generally the ones who are making lots of money were already famous before they joined the platform and so on. It's also the fact that the internet is forever, and these images are out there, and it damages your long-term mating prospects to have been on OnlyFans. And actually, it is clearly the case that female beauty is an incredibly valuable resource. But I think maybe the way in which it needs to be understood distinctly from economic power is it is to some extent vicarious. You can acquire enormous power as a beautiful woman through access to typically male political and economic power. But it doesn't last forever. If you're able to secure a very high status husband, for instance, and he commits to you for life, you've translated your beauty into real and lasting power. If you're not able to do that, then you will very quickly, age 35, age 40, age out of having any access to that kind of power, and then you will potentially be paying the cost later down the line. So there are some women who've become very wealthy on OnlyFans, but in general, I would say that it's very, very poor strategy. And, as ever, it is presented as a kind of short-term boon.